So guys, we got breaking news again. We're recording the sort of, at the counter video once again. And quick, before we get into this video about the GH6, check out the link up here. I'm shooting a web series on these cameras. Okay, check it out if you want to. Really appreciate it. We've got some leaked specs and images from the GH6. Now, 4/3 rumors say these specs are fake or false, but we're still gonna go through them just to see what you guys think. And we're just gonna go through them really quick since they probably aren't real and definitely aren't confirmed. And so we have the standard stuff of like the 4K 60, 4K 260 now, 4K 120, and then 5.7K 60. Then here's the rumors part. We've got tested at the Beijing Olympics, plausible, image plane phase difference AF, and hybrid AF. Not sure what that means. It says a 30 million pixel sensor, which I think that's basically 30 megapixels, or exactly 30 megapixels, and a few other things. It's unclear if the mechanical shutter is gone. So those are the rumors. Glad we got those out of the way quick. What I really want to talk about is this new body design. Now, here it is, a sort of front view. We can see the sensor. It looks stabilized. It looks roughly a micro four thirds size sensor, or slightly bigger like the GH5S maybe, which had a 1.9 or 1.8 crop factor instead of 2. Most people don't know that, I feel. And yeah, it looks great. It has the same looking grip to me, the same placement of the dials. One placement of the custom button is by the lens mount, remember that. And now there's a second one down below, kind of like on the S1H. And in fact, that's kind of going to be a theme here, is the GH6 is, I think, going to be a playing ground for the S1H Mark II and their future full frame cameras. They're going to really put a lot of stuff in this thing that I think is interesting, and that I think they're going to either carry over if it works into those future cameras, or maybe they'll scrap if it's not as popular. But anyway, so we got those two custom buttons, and then we've got the, up here by where the logo used to be, we've got just the regular autofocus assist lamp if you're doing photography. But one interesting thing, if you go right across from there, is another, it seems like another AF assist lamp, but that actually, or at least one of those two things, I think is actually going to be a tally light, just like the S1H again. And we actually could see that in one of the Panasonic live streams with Sean. He had a camera out of focus mysteriously in the background, and when they hit record, a light came on, like a red light, recording light. So that's very interesting. Just under that, we've got the GH6 logo here. Looks pretty slick. And further down, the lens release, just like normal. And again, just like the S1H, a front record button. So yeah, that's going to be able to be a place to hit record, which might be more convenient on, certain higher end, or just in different situations. I definitely like that about the S1H. I think that was one of the better design features of the S1H in terms of ergonomics, and I'm glad to see that make a return here. So one more thing I wanted to note here from this front view was, well, two things, I guess. The first was, if you actually look at the GH5, the mount here was, pressed on with 4 screws, and with the GH6 here, there's actually 6 screws, which is gonna hopefully make the lens mount a little more robust when it comes to some of these heavier lenses. I know I had a C-mount lens, a 22-90, which I actually have an old test video on my channel for from a long time ago, and that lens was super heavy, and a lot of these big cinema lenses, big anamorphic lenses are really heavy, and a lot of people get worried. I mean, people even got worried that the Leica 10-25 or the Leica 25-50 were going to be too heavy for the micro four thirds mount, and there's way heavier lenses than that. So it really does seem like they've reinforced that sensor mount area. So yeah, just something to note there. Not really like any big meaning behind that. So also, I actually did a quick overlay view with the GH5 and the GH6. So I essentially lined up the sensor and the mount and in Photoshop and kind of clicked in between them like this, and you can see the camera might actually end up being a little bit bigger, maybe a little bit thicker on the bottom, maybe a little bit more on the right side by the GH6 logo. It's really hard to say, but the grip seems about the same. I think this camera is going to be a little bit bigger than the GH5, which I know the GH5 is kind of big for a micro four thirds camera anyway, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to be like, can't believe they made this thing bigger, but based on the specs we're seeing, I think it had to be bigger to not overheat and not have issues. But we actually have a second picture. Let's take a look here. So this has a pretty large cinema lens on here. I actually don't know what lens it is, and it looks like it has maybe an adapter as well. So your guess is as good as mine on this lens. If you know what lens this is, comment down in the comments. So yeah, if we get onto the side here, you know, we've got the red accent on the dial up here. We can see that red record button again. And we can see a fully flippy screen, which is something that I think everybody's learning that a lot of people like, and even if people hate them, which again, I can understand not liking them or preferring something else, but the people who actually hate flip screens, I just don't get it, because you can just not flip it out. But anyway, let's not start that argument. You can see they do seem to have a fully articulating flippy screen, and something I actually didn't notice at first was a cooling unit back here. Again, looking very S1H-like with that built-in fan. We don't want to have any Canon R5 and R6 issues here, so it seems like Panasonic has taken notes from its full-frame cameras that succeeded in some of Canon's full-frame cameras that had some issues in the heat department, and implemented a fan in this thing, which makes sense if it's shooting 4K 120 10-bit or 5.7K 60 frames a second. So we'll see. Is this going to compromise it as like a jack of all trades, fairly compact travel camera? Is this really just placing it right in the high-end video game, in the high-end film game? Hard to say, but that's what I predicted Panasonic would do, is really focus in on video productions, videographers, and that seems to be in line with this body design. Although at a second glance it looks like the fan actually pushing the LCD away from the body might be a benefit, because when you have HDMI or headphones or mics plugged in, that flippy screen might not be as in the way, or those cables might not be as in the way of the flippy screen, but we'll just have to see on that one. I also want to talk about that price really quickly, because it's rumored to be about $2,500, and now the other GH cameras all seem to be in the $1,500 to $2,000 range upon release, and bumping up to $2,500 given the current just economies, the current camera economy and world, and the prices for some certain competitors. You know, this is less expensive than some of their high-end full-frame stuff, which makes sense. This is more expensive than the older models, which makes sense. And it's still cheaper than a lot of full-frame cameras that only do marginally better video, you know? So, like for example, even 4K 60 is still pretty rare without an additional crop. And so having 4K 60, 4K 120, 5.7K 60 with no additional crop past the built-in micro four thirds crop, it's interesting for sure. So, you know, you look at the R5, you know, $4,000 or $5,000. You look at the A1 at $6,400, $6,800. These are pretty expensive cameras, and I know they're full frame, and they're like 50 megapixels, and they shoot 8K and everything like that, but 6K, essentially 6K 60, 4K 120, 4K 240 maybe. I do feel like in most ways, especially in video, the GH5 is going to be really competitive. And I know it's been saying like, hey, that's probably not true, but if they have at least a 24 or 30 megapixel sensor, I think that's going to make it really appealing for a lot of photography work as well. So I don't know. I don't want to speculate too long. Let's cut this video before it gets too crazy. But yeah, I'm really excited for this announcement. I'm really excited about this leak. I think that body design looks really cool. It really reminds me of something like a GH2 or GH3 somehow. It feels classic, but it feels like a really great update too. And if I think of what it reminds me of, I'll post it and right now. I didn't think of it, did I? See you.